Hey everyone, and welcome. We're going to be talking about something super important for all you future EFL and ESL teachers.
Yeah.
It's communicative language teaching.
Oh, that's a big one.
It is a big one. It's CLT for short, and we're going to be looking at two really cool chapters.
Okay.
One by Diane Larson Freeman and one by Patricia A. Duff.
Awesome.
So we're going to be looking at, what is CLT? Why is it relevant in EFL and ESL contexts all over the world? And then also, what are some of the challenges that you might face when you're actually in the classroom trying to implement this?
Right.
And we'll also be looking at some specific ways that CLT can be used to teach young learners
Okay, cool.
and those who are preparing for academic study.
Awesome.
So without further ado, let's just jump right in.
Let's do it.
What is CLT?
That's the question, isn't it?
That is the question. I think the Duff chapter had a really good definition.
Okay.
Basically, boiling it down to CLT emphasizes real communication as the primary goal of language learning.
And that's a huge shift, from how language has traditionally been taught. It's like moving away from just rote memorization, vocabulary lists, grammar drills, and actually thinking about how can we give students the power to actually use the language in a real life situation?
Yeah, and I think for, all of our listeners out there who are training to be ESL teachers, you're going to have students who are learning English for very practical reasons. They want to work in an international company or study abroad or just connect with people from different cultures.
Exactly.
And CLT aligns perfectly with that.
It really does.
I was thinking back to when I was learning Spanish in high school.
Yeah.
It was all verb conjugations, grammar drills. And honestly, I could barely string a basic sentence together, let alone have a real conversation with someone.
It can be so frustrating.
Oh, it was so frustrating.
Yeah.
And CLT is like the complete opposite of that.
It is.
It's really focusing on interaction.
Yeah.
Meaningful communication.
And authenticity, bringing in real life.
Yes, and it's interesting because CLT emerged in the 1970s.
That's right.
And there were some major changes that were happening in the world at that time that really shaped its development.
Yeah.
So what were those changes and how did they influence the birth of CLT?
Well, you have to picture the world back then. Globalization was starting to really take off.
Okay.
Migration patterns were changing. People were moving around more than ever before.
Right.
And they needed practical language skills to navigate this increasingly interconnected world. So language teaching had to adapt.
Yeah.
It had to move beyond just focusing on grammar and vocabulary and actually think about how can we equip learners with the skills to communicate in real-world scenarios.
Yeah.
But at the same time, there was this huge shift happening within linguistics.
Oh, interesting.
Linguists started moving beyond just analyzing the rules of grammar.
Right.
They started investigating how language is actually used.
Okay. In real-world contexts?
So they're taking into account like the context of the situation, culture, the intention of the speaker.
All those things that shape the way we actually communicate?
That's really cool. So it's not enough to just know the rules. You also have to know how to use the rules effectively.
I got it.
In different situations.
Exactly.
That makes total sense.
And that brings us to this concept of communicative competence.
Yes.
Which is a really central idea in both of the chapters we're looking at today.
Okay, communicative competence. I've heard that term before.
Yeah.
But I'll be honest, it's still a little fuzzy for me.
Okay.
Can you break it down a bit further?
Of course. So communicative competence, it's not just about, knowing grammar and vocab.
Right.
It's being able to use that language appropriately in different social contexts.
Okay.
And the Duff chapter mentions this model by Canale and Swain that outlines 4 key components of communicative competence.
Okay, I'm ready. All right, so first up, we've got linguistic competence. Okay. Which is basically knowing the nuts and bolts of the language.
Yeah.
Grammar, vocabulary, pronunciation, all that good stuff.
So that's kind of like the foundation.
It is.
But there's more to it.
There's so much more.
Okay.
So then we've got sociolinguistic competence.
Ooh.
And this is all about using language appropriately in different social situations.
It's a big one.
It is a big one.
Yeah.
So this means understanding things like when to be formal or informal, picking up on cultural norms and expectations.
Right.
Even being able to interpret humor and sarcasm.
Yes.
All those kind of subtle aspects of communication.
And that's especially important for EFL and ESL learners.
It is.
Because they're navigating all these new cultural landscapes.
Absolutely. It can be really tricky to pick up on those social cues and those nuances.
Exactly.
So then the third component, we've got discourse competence.
Discourse competence.
Yes, and this refers to the ability to produce and understand coherent, cohesive spoken and written texts.
So basically being able to connect your ideas, structure your arguments, and use language effectively.
Exactly.
For a variety of purposes.
Exactly, whether you're having a casual conversation or giving a formal presentation.
So it's about getting your message across in a way that's clear and easy to understand.
Exactly.
Awesome. Okay, so we've got linguistic competence, sociolinguistic competence, discourse competence. What's number 4?
Number 4 is strategic competence.
Ooh, strategic competence.
I like that one.
Me too.
This is all about using communication strategies to overcome gaps in your knowledge or understanding.
Okay.
So imagine you're trying to express an idea, but you can't think of the right word.
Happens to me all the time.
It happens to all of us, right?
Yeah.
So you might paraphrase.
Okay.
You might ask for clarification. You might use nonverbal cues to get your message across.
So it's like having a toolkit of communication strategies to help you navigate those tricky situations.
Yeah, and I think all 4 of these components together, they make up what we call communicative competence.
So it's not just one thing. It's like...
It's multifaceted.
It's multifaceted, yeah.
It's a skill set that goes way beyond just grammatical accuracy.
It's about being able to use the language effectively and appropriately to achieve real-world communication goals.
That's it.
And as future EFL, ESL teachers, we need to think about how we can develop all of these dimensions in our students.
Absolutely. It's about giving them the tools and strategies they need to navigate the complexities of communication in their target language.
Awesome. Okay, so we've talked about what CLT is, why it emerged, but let's get down to like the nitty-gritty here.
Okay, let's do it.
How does this actually look in the classroom?
That's the real question.
That's the real question.
Yeah.
And both of these chapters give some really fascinating examples of CLT in action.
Yeah, they do.
And I think I want to focus on the ones that focus on young learners.
Okay.
And those who are preparing for academic study.
Sounds good.
Because I think that's really relevant for our audience.
Yeah.
So let's start with young learners.
Okay.
I thought that the example in the Duff chapter about the teacher in China who pretends to have a cold.
Oh, yeah. I love that word.
To teach the weather vocabulary was brilliant.
It's such a simple but effective way to engage young learners.
He's like sniffling dramatically.
Yeah.
And he's like, what's the weather like today? And they're like,
it's cold.
It's cold.
It's so clever.
So simple, but so effective.
Yeah.
And I think it just shows how you can incorporate those CLT principles into even the simplest activities.
Absolutely.
Yeah. What about examples for students who are preparing for academic study?
Well, the Larson-Freeman chapter talks about using authentic materials, like newspaper articles, academic journals, to create really engaging activities for students. So one example that she gives is having students unscramble sentences from a newspaper article.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah. So it's not just a dry grammar exercise.
Right.
It's a chance for them to collaborate, problem solve, and actually use the language in a way that feels relevant to their academic goals.
That's a great way to bridge that gap between classroom learning and real-world application.
Yes, absolutely.
And it highlights the importance of authentic materials.
Yeah.
Which both of these chapters really emphasize.
They do.
Yeah.
And I think authentic materials are so crucial because they expose students to real-life language, not just the kind of contrived language that you often find in textbooks. No. So it helps them develop those skills they need to, navigate academic texts, engage in discussions, express themselves confidently in an academic setting.
I love that. So we're starting to see how CLT can look different.
Right.
And feel different depending on who you're teaching.
Absolutely.
And what their goals are.
Yeah.
But let's be real, there are some challenges. When it comes to implementing CLT right.
Of course.
The Duff chapter mentions a few standardized testing pressures, large class sizes, lack of resources, inconsistencies in teacher training.
All very real challenges.
Those are all very real challenges. Yeah. And I think a lot of, our listeners out there who are pre-service teachers are probably thinking about these things.
Absolutely.
Like, how do I balance CLT with these high stakes exams that are, often very grammar-focused.
Right.
How do we reconcile those two things?
It's a great question, and it's something that I think a lot of teachers grapple with.
Yeah.
But it's about finding a balance.
Okay.
You can absolutely teach grammar effectively within a communicative framework.
Okay.
So instead of drilling grammar rules in isolation, try integrating them into meaningful activities and real-world contexts.
So make it relevant to the students' lives.
Exactly.
And their goals.
Mm-hmm.
Awesome. So it's not about throwing grammar out the window. No.
It's about teaching it in a way that supports communicative competence.
Exactly.
Yeah. And I think even standardized tests are starting to incorporate more communicative tasks. So by focusing on CLT, you're actually preparing your students in a more holistic and effective way.
Absolutely.
Okay, that's reassuring. And what about the issue of resources?
Yeah.
I know that can be a big concern for new teachers, especially those who are working in under-resourced schools or countries.
Right.
What do you say to them?
Well, I think it's important to remember that CLT doesn't require fancy textbooks or expensive software.
Right.
You can use authentic materials that are readily available, newspapers, magazines, websites, even your students' own experiences and interests.
Yeah.
Get creative.
Be resourceful.
Exactly.
I love that.
Think outside the box.
And what about large class sizes?
That's another tough one.
Yeah.
But there are strategies you can use.
Think about activities that encourage pair and group work.
Okay.
Like information gap activities or jigsaw readings. These not only get students interacting and using the language, but they also make it easier to manage a larger group.
Yeah.
And even with limited time for individual attention, you can still create a classroom environment that fosters communication and collaboration.
So it's about setting up the right kind of classroom culture.
Yeah.
And dynamics.
Absolutely.
These are all great tips, and I think it's so important for future teachers to hear these practical suggestions. It can feel overwhelming.
It can.
To think about all the challenges, but it's also empowering to know that there are solutions, strategies out there.
Exactly, and you don't have to do it alone.
That's right.
One of the best things you can do is connect with other teachers, share ideas, learn from each other's experiences.
There's a whole community out there.
There is a huge community, online and offline, of EFL, ESL teachers who are all in the same boat.
And they're willing to share.
Absolutely.
And help each other.
Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground.
We have.
In this first part of our deep dive into CLT.
Yeah.
We've talked about what it is, why it emerged, how it looks in the classroom.
Yeah.
And some of the challenges that you might face as future teachers.
Right.
But CLT is more than just
it's not just a checklist.
It's not just a checklist of techniques and activities.
Yeah.
It's really a mindset. A philosophy of language teaching.
Absolutely.
That puts real communication at the heart of the learning experience.
I love that.
And that's something that we'll explore further in the next part of our conversation.
I'm looking forward to it.
So stay tuned. We'll be right back.
See you soon. Welcome back, everybody. It's great to be back. And, I was thinking about our conversation before the break.
Yeah.
And it really struck me how CLT just kind of flips the script on that traditional classroom dynamic.
It does.
It's no longer that teacher-centered approach where the teacher is just standing at the front, lecturing, dictating information. It becomes much more student-centered.
Yes.
The teacher takes on this role of facilitator, guiding and supporting students as they engage in real communication.
And the students are not just passively absorbing information.
Yeah, right.
They're actively constructing. Meaning they're negotiating ideas with their peers.
Yeah.
They're really using the language to express themselves.
Yeah.
And both chapters actually have some really great examples of how this plays out in practice.
Yeah.
I'm thinking back to that example from the Larson Freeman chapter.
Which one?
The one where students had to unscramble sentences.
Oh, yeah.
From the newspaper article.
That's a good one.
I thought that was such a good example of a CLT activity.
And it's not just about getting the grammar right.
Right.
It's about that collaboration, that problem solving.
Yeah.
Using the language in a way that feels authentic and relevant to students' lives.
And I also love that example from the Duff chapter with the teacher pretending to have a cold.
Oh, yeah.
To teach weather vocabulary.
I love that one.
It's so simple, but so effective.
It is.
And engaging.
And it just brings that language to life.
Yeah.
For those young learners.
It does, and it's creative.
It is.
So I think those examples really highlight, that one of the key principles of CLT is to create opportunities for students to use language for real communication.
Yes.
Whether it's through games or role plays or discussions or, project-based learning.
All of those things.
All of those things.
Yeah.
Speaking of games, both chapters talk about the importance of making language learning fun and engaging.
It has to be fun.
And I think back to, my own language learning experiences.
Yeah.
And the classes that stand out are the ones where I was laughing.
Right.
I was having fun.
Yeah.
I was really connecting with the language.
Yeah. Absolutely. And I think when students are enjoying themselves, they're just more likely to be motivated, to be engaged.
Yeah.
Open to learning.
Yeah, for sure.
And CLT provides so many opportunities for creativity and playfulness.
It does.
In the classroom. Think about role plays where students can take on different personas.
Oh, yeah.
Simulations where they have to, solve problems or negotiate deals. Storytelling activities where they can share their own experiences.
It's all about bringing that language to life. Making it real for them.
Absolutely.
Oh, it's exciting.
It is.
I'm also curious about how CLT views errors.
That's a good one.
Because I know that in traditional language teaching, errors were seen as this
a big no-no.
Big no-no.
Something to avoid.
Something to avoid at all costs.
Right.
Is that still the case in CLT?
It's so different.
Okay.
In CLT, errors are seen as a natural part of the learning process.
Okay.
It's not about achieving perfect accuracy right from the start. It's about fluency.
Yeah.
Communication, and that willingness to take risks with the language.
So it's more about encouraging students to experiment.
Yeah.
And not be afraid to make those mistakes.
Yes.
Along the way.
It's part of the process.
Which makes sense if you think about how we learn our first language.
Right.
We make tons of mistakes.
We do.
But it doesn't stop us from communicating.
And eventually, through practice and feedback, we start to get it right.
We do.
And it's the same principle with learning a second or foreign language.
Yeah. So how do we as teachers provide feedback?
Oh, that's a good question.
In a CLT classroom?
Well, it's all about teacher observation and strategic feedback.
Yeah.
So we're constantly observing our students, paying attention to their communication strategies, noticing patterns in their errors, and then providing feedback that's targeted and meaningful.
So we're not necessarily correcting every single error.
No.
We're being more selective and focusing on the things that will really help those students move
forward in their language development.
Yeah, and feedback doesn't always have to come from the teacher.
That's right.
Right.
Peer feedback can be incredibly valuable in the CLT classroom.
Because when students give each other feedback, they're not only learning from each other, they're also developing their own awareness of language.
And that metalinguistic awareness.
Yeah, that's a great point. So what about materials?
Okay.
What kinds of materials are typically used in CLT?
Well, both chapters really emphasize the importance of authentic materials.
And I love that point because it's about bringing the real world into the classroom.
Absolutely.
And making that learning experience
authentic,
more relevant and engaging.
Yeah, and I think authentic materials are so crucial because they expose students to real-life language use, not just that contrived language that you often find in textbooks.
Right. So what exactly are authentic materials?
Well, authentic materials can be anything.
Anything?
Yeah, from newspaper articles, magazine articles, blog posts, song lyrics, movie clips, podcasts.
It's really anything.
It's anything that's created for a real-world audience, not specifically for language learners.
That opens up a lot of possibilities.
It does, and especially with technology, the options are pretty much limitless.
You can find something on any topic.
On any topic.
Imaginable.
And you can adapt it to suit your students' needs.
So you can create listening activities with podcasts, reading activities, with online articles, speaking activities, with videos.
Yeah.
The sky's the limit.
The sky's the limit.
Okay, so we talked about the theory behind CLT, the role of the teacher and the learner, how errors are viewed, the types of materials that are used. But let's get even more practical here.
Okay, let's do it.
What advice would you give to our pre-service EFL ESL teachers who are eager to start applying these CLT principles in their own classrooms?
Well, I think first and foremost, it's crucial to plan your lessons with communication in mind.
Okay.
So when you're planning a lesson, ask yourself, what are the communicative goals I want my students to achieve?
So start with the end in mind.
Exactly.
Like, what do we want them to be able to do?
Yes. What do you want them to be able to do with the language by the end of this lesson?
Yeah.
And then think about what kinds of activities will help them practice those goals. How can I create a classroom environment that fosters real communication and collaboration?
So it's not just about the activities themselves.
It's the whole environment.
It's the whole environment.
Yeah.
And what about classroom management?
Ooh, that's a big one.
Because that could be a challenge for new teachers.
It can.
Especially if they're trying to create this more learner-centered environment where there's more movement and interaction.
Yeah, there's more going on.
How do you manage that?
Well, I think there are a few things you can do.
Okay.
First of all, establish clear expectations
Okay.
for behavior and participation.
Right from the beginning.
Right from the get-go. Make sure students understand what's expected of them. During group work, pair work, whole class discussions, you might even create a set of classroom norms together.
Oh, that's a great idea.
As a class, which can help foster that sense of shared responsibility for creating a positive learning environment.
It gives them ownership.
It does.
Yeah, and then consistency is key.
Absolutely.
Once you've set those expectations, enforce them.
Be consistent.
Consistently.
And that helps students understand you're serious about creating that structured and productive learning environment.
What about dealing with parents?
Ooh, that's another one.
Because parents might be expecting a more traditional approach.
Right.
Very grammar focused.
Yeah.
How do you deal with that?
Well, I think parent communication is so important, especially when you're implementing a new approach like CLT. So be proactive in communicating with parents about your teaching methods and the benefits of CLT.
So how would you explain CLT?
Okay.
To parents who might be skeptical?
Oh, good question.
Yeah.
Well, I would start by emphasizing that CLT is all about helping students become confident and fluent communicators in the real world.
So it's about those real world skills.
It is.
Yeah.
And while grammar is still important, it's not the only focus.
Right.
We also want students to be able to use the language effectively in a variety of situations.
Right.
Express themselves clearly, understand different cultural perspectives, interact confidently with native speakers.
It's about giving them the tools.
It is.
To really thrive in a globalized world.
Absolutely.
And I think it's important to highlight that research has consistently shown that CLT is an effective approach to language teaching.
There's research to back it up.
There is.
And I think students who learn through CLT tend to be more motivated, more engaged, and more successful.
So you have that research to back you up.
You do.
Which is always helpful.
It is, especially when you're talking to parents.
Especially when you're talking to parents who might be resistant to change.
Exactly.
And you can even invite parents into the classroom.
Oh, that's a great idea.
To observe a lesson.
Yeah.
Or to participate in an activity.
I love that.
So they can see it in action.
Seeing is believing.
Exactly. And I think that's a great way to, win over even the most skeptical parents.
Absolutely.
Yeah. These are fantastic suggestions. And I think
I hope so.
Our future teachers out there will find them really, really helpful.
Yeah.
But, teaching is a journey.
It is.
It's full of learning experiences, both for you and your students.
And there will be bumps along the way.
There will be bumps.
Yeah.
But it's about being flexible.
Absolutely. Open to learn.
Open to learning.
From your experiences.
Yeah. And don't be afraid to experiment.
Try new things.
Try new things and just see what works.
Find what works for you and your students.
Exactly. CLT is not this rigid set of rules.
That's not a recipe.
It's a framework that allows for creativity.
Yeah, and adaptation.
And adaptation.
Yeah, because what works for one group of students in one context might not work for another. Yeah. So it's about being observant, reflective, and being willing to adjust your approach.
As needed.
As needed.
So it's about being a reflective practitioner.
It is.
And one of the best ways to do that is to stay connected to other teachers.
Absolutely.
Right.
There are so many amazing online communities and resources out there for EFL, ESL teachers.
There are.
Where you can share ideas.
Yeah.
Ask questions, get support. Find inspiration.
And don't forget about those amazing teachers in your own schools and communities.
That's right.
Reach out to your colleagues.
Observe other teachers in action. Ask for help and advice.
And I think most importantly, you're not alone.
You're not alone
in this journey.
There's a whole community of passionate and dedicated teachers out there who are just as excited about CLT as you are.
I love that. And that's one of the things that I love the most about the ESL teaching community.
That's it too.
It's that willingness to share and support each other.
Absolutely.
And learn from each other.
Yeah.
So before we move on, I do want to acknowledge that, even with all the benefits and the advantages of CLT, it's not without its critics.
That's true. Like any teaching approach, it's been subject to debate and scrutiny over the years.
So what are some of the main criticisms?
Well, one common criticism is that CLT can be too focused on fluency at the expense of accuracy. Some people argue that it can lead to students developing bad habits or fossilizing errors if they're not given enough explicit grammar instruction or corrective feedback.
So it's that whole debate about fluency versus accuracy.
It is.
Which has been going on
forever.
But I think it's important to remember that CLT doesn't advocate for ignoring grammar altogether.
It's about finding that balance between communicative fluency and grammatical accuracy.
Yeah, and that balance might look different depending on the learners and their goals.
Absolutely.
What are some of the other criticisms?
Well, another one is that CLT can be difficult to implement in certain contexts. Particularly in large classes with limited resources or in educational systems that place a heavy emphasis on standardized testing. So those factors can pose real challenges for teachers who are trying to create that more communicative and learner-centered classroom.
But I think that's where that adaptability and resourcefulness come in.
Absolutely.
Finding creative ways to incorporate those principles, even if you can't fully implement it by the book, so to speak.
It's about taking those core principles and adapting them to your specific context and the needs of your students.
What else?
Well, another criticism, which I think is particularly relevant for pre-service teachers, is that CLT can sometimes feel a bit overwhelming or ambiguous.
I can see that.
Especially for those who are just starting out.
When I first learned about CLT, it was like a huge paradigm shift.
It is.
From the traditional approaches that I was familiar with. And I wasn't always sure how to translate those principles into practice.
It can be tricky.
Yeah.
It's a broad approach.
Right.
Multifaceted, and it can take time and experience to really understand how to apply it effectively.
So what advice would you give to our pre-service teachers who might be feeling a bit lost, overwhelmed by CLT?
First of all, don't be afraid to ask questions.
Yeah.
Talk to your professors, your mentors, experienced CLT teachers, anyone who can help you clarify your understanding and provide guidance.
And there are so many resources available.
There are.
Online and in libraries.
Absolutely.
Books, articles, websites, podcasts.
Podcasts like this one.
Yeah. So do your research. Learn as much as you can about CLT.
The more you understand the theory and the principles, the more confident you'll feel applying them in the classroom.
And remember, it's a journey.
It is.
It takes time and practice to develop your own style as a CLT teacher.
You're not going to get it perfect right away.
Don't expect to be perfect right away. Be patient with yourself. Be willing to experiment. And most importantly, have fun.
Have fun. That's the key.
So I think we've covered
a lot
of ground in this discussion about CLT.
Yeah, from the theory to the practice to the challenges and the criticisms.
But I think the key takeaway is that CLT is more than just... It's a mindset. It's a philosophy of language teaching that puts real communication at the heart.
At the heart of it all.
Of the learning experience.
It's about empowering those learners to use language confidently and effectively in real-world situations to foster intercultural understanding and to equip them with the skills they need to thrive.
In an increasingly globalized society. And I think that's a perfect note to end this part of our conversation on.
It is.
So we'll be back. After a short break.
See you then.
Welcome back to The Deep Dive. We've been talking about CLT, and I think it's so important for our future ESL teachers.
It is.
Before the break, we were talking about some of the criticisms of CLT.
Right.
And one of them was that it focuses too much on fluency at the expense of accuracy.
Yeah, that's a common one.
But remember, CLT isn't about just like throwing all the grammar rules out the window.
No, not at all.
It's about finding that balance.
Finding that sweet spot.
Between fluency and accuracy.
Exactly.
And we can achieve that through, good lesson planning, strategic feedback.
Absolutely.
And we were also talking about how CLT can feel a little bit overwhelming.
It can be a little overwhelming.
They're new teachers.
Yeah.
Especially when it comes to adapting it to different contexts.
Yeah. There's no one-size-fits-all recipe for CLT.
There isn't.
You really have to tailor it
to
your specific teaching environment and the needs of your learners.
So let's talk about that.
Okay.
What are some things that our pre-service teachers should consider?
Well, I think the first thing is to really have a deep understanding of your learners.
Yeah.
Think about their motivations, their goals, their learning styles.
Know your students.
Know your students, absolutely.
Are they learning English for academic purposes, or are they learning English for, professional reasons or personal enrichment, or
all those things?
All those things.
It's their why.
Yeah. What's their why?
And once you know their why, then you can start to tailor your lessons and your activities.
Right. Make it relevant to their lives.
Exactly. And it's not just about what they want to learn, but how they learn best.
Oh, that's a good point.
Some learners thrive in collaborative settings.
Right.
Others might prefer more individualized instruction.
Yeah. You got to be aware of those differences.
Absolutely.
And then, of course, we have to think about the environment.
Yeah. The teaching environment.
The teaching environment. So things like class size, the resources that are available, any curriculum mandates.
Right. All of those factors are going to influence how you implement CLT.
Yeah. So if you're working with limited resources, you might have to get a little bit creative.
Absolutely.
With how you use authentic materials.
Right.
Or if you have a really large class, you might have to adapt the activities.
Yeah.
So it sounds like flexibility and adaptability.
Those are key.
Are really important for being a successful CLT teacher.
Absolutely.
I can imagine it's really rewarding.
It is.
To see your students.
To see them blossom as communicators.
Yeah.
To witness those aha moments.
Yeah.
When they realize, hey, I can actually use this language.
For going and communicate.
To connect with others. It's really special.
That's what makes it all worthwhile.
It does.
And I think that's really the ultimate goal of CLT.
It is empowering learners to use language confidently and effectively in real-world situations to foster intercultural understanding and to equip them with the skills they need to thrive in an increasingly globalized society.
Beautifully said.
Yeah.
Okay, so we've talked about tailoring CLT to different contexts and learner needs. Now I'm really curious about the role of technology.
Okay.
In enhancing CLT.
That's a fun one.
The Duff chapter mentions some really cool stuff.
It does. Technology has revolutionized language teaching, and it offers a wealth of resources and tools that can enhance CLT in amazing ways.
It really has. I mean, think about all the things that are available now, like virtual classrooms, online platforms, language learning apps, all the authentic content online.
Oh, it's
mind-blowing.
We can connect our students with other English speakers worldwide. Expose them to different accents and cultures, create truly immersive learning experiences.
Imagine your students participating in virtual exchange programs.
Yeah.
Collaborating with students from other countries.
Creating their own podcasts and videos in English.
It's incredible.
The possibilities are endless.
And it also can help address some of those challenges we talked about earlier.
Right.
Like if you have a large class, online tools can help you differentiate instruction.
Yeah.
Provide more personalized feedback.
Absolutely.
And if you're working with limited resources, the internet is just a treasure trove of free and low-cost materials.
Yeah, everything from dictionaries to grammar exercises to authentic videos, podcasts, articles.
It's amazing.
It really has democratized access to language learning resources.
Yeah, and it creates so many opportunities for students who might not have had them before.
It's a really exciting time to be a language teacher.
It is.
And I can't wait to see how technology continues to shape and enhance CLT.
I know, me too. So I think we've covered a lot of ground in this deep dive into CLT.
We have.
We've looked at its core principles, its practical applications, the potential challenges.
And the possibilities.
And the exciting possibilities offered by technology.
It's been a great conversation.
It has. And I really hope that, for all of you future EFL and ESL teachers out there, that this has been helpful.
I hope so.
So as you embark on your teaching journey, remember that CLT is more than just
it's a mindset,
a set of techniques and activities.
A philosophy.
It's a mindset. It's a philosophy.
Yeah.
That puts real communication at the heart of language learning.
Absolutely.
Embraces principles, adapt them to your unique context, and most importantly, have fun.
Have fun.
And never stop learning.
Yeah. The field is constantly evolving.
It is.
So stay curious, stay connected with other teachers, and keep exploring new ways to empower your students.
We're so excited for you to take the principles of CLT and make them your own.
Yeah. Good luck, everyone.
Do not forget to like the video, share it, subscribe, and hit the notification bell for future videos.